Marcus Hale thought the most dangerous part of his Sunday morning would be convincing his 8-year-old daughter not to drown her pancakes in syrup. The little diner on the edge of Brookhaven was warm, crowded, and ordinary in the way only small-town places could be, with coffee cups clinking, bacon sizzling, and sunlight pouring through the windows like nothing terrible had ever happened in the world. Lily sat across from him laughing as she drew a crooked heart on her plate. And for one brief moment, Marcus almost believed the past had finally stopped chasing him. Then the bell above the door rang. 3 men stepped inside wearing charcoal suits, polished shoes, and the kind of silence that made every conversation in the room slowly die. They did not look at the menu. They did not wait to be seated. Their eyes moved across the diner until they landed on a woman sitting alone at table 7. Her coffee cup trembled in her hand. Her face went pale. The man in front, silver-haired and smiling like a funeral director, said one name, Claire Whitmore. Marcus saw the woman flinch as if she had been struck. He saw one of the men move his hand toward his jacket. He saw Lily stop smiling. Every instinct he had buried after years of war came awake at once. He should have stayed quiet. He should have protected only his daughter. He should have let strangers handle stranger problems. But when the men closed in on the terrified woman, Marcus slowly stood, placed one steady hand on Lily's shoulder, and said the words that would turn a peaceful breakfast into a battlefield. Wrong table. Wrong day, gentlemen. Marcus Hale had learned to measure peace in small things. The weight of his daughter's hand in his. The smell of fresh coffee drifting through an old diner. The soft scrape of a fork against a plate. The way sunlight could turn a cheap glass of water into something that looked almost holy. For most people in Brookhaven, Ohio, Sunday morning at Finch's Diner was nothing more than a habit. For Marcus, it was proof that he had survived long enough to build something worth protecting. The diner sat at the corner of Maple and 3rd, wedged between a closed hardware store and a barber shop with a striped pole that had not spun in years. Its red vinyl booths were cracked at the seams. Its floors had been polished by decades of boots, sneakers, and tired waitresses, and the walls were crowded with faded photographs of Little League teams, harvest parades, and soldiers who had once left Brookhaven waving from buses and come back changed, if they came back at all. Marcus never looked too long at those pictures. He had enough ghosts without borrowing anyone else's. Across from him, Lily Hale leaned over her pancakes with the intense concentration of an artist completing a masterpiece. She was 8 years old, missing one front tooth, wearing a yellow sweater with a tiny embroidered bee near the collar, and using a trail of maple syrup to draw a heart that kept collapsing into a sticky puddle. "It looks like a potato," Marcus said, hiding a smile behind his coffee cup. Lily gasped, as if he had insulted a national treasure. "It is not a potato, it's a heart. You just don't understand modern art." Marcus put one hand to his chest. "My mistake, Miss Hale. I didn't know I was dining with a genius." She grinned, and the sight loosened something inside him that had been tight for years. Lily had her mother's smile. That was both Marcus's greatest comfort and his sharpest wound. There were mornings when the resemblance caught him unprepared, when Lily would tilt her head or laugh at some private joke, and suddenly Sarah was there again, standing barefoot in their tiny kitchen, telling him not to burn the eggs. But Sarah had been gone 3 years now, taken by a winter highway accident that left Marcus with a daughter, a mortgage, and a silence in the house that no radio could fill. Since then, he had learned to braid hair, badly pack lunches, carefully check homework, wash pink socks separately from white shirts, and make promises he was terrified he might not be able to keep. Above all, he had promised Lily a normal life. No more sudden departures, no more folded flags, no more phone calls from places with names she could not pronounce. No more waking up to find her father sitting in the dark with his hands shaking from dreams he would never explain. Brookhaven had been the place he chose for that promise. It was small enough that people waved even when they did not know you well. Quiet enough that the loudest sound after 10 at night was usually a freight train passing beyond the cornfields, and ordinary enough that a man could disappear into work if he kept his head down. Marcus built furniture in a workshop behind their house. Tables, cabinets, rocking chairs, bookshelves, anything that required patience, strength, and an understanding of how broken pieces could be joined into something useful again. Wood made sense to him. It did not lie. It did not hide explosives beneath roads or smile while making promises it intended to break. If you respected the grain and took your time, wood told you what it wanted to become. People were harder. Marcus glanced toward the counter where Ruth Bennett refilled coffee cups with the authority of a woman who had been doing it since before half the town was born. Ruth had silver hair pinned into a bun, a pencil tucked behind one ear, and the kind of eyes that could spot a lie, a fever, or a broken heart from 20 feet away. She winked at Lily, then pointed at the syrup bottle with mock suspicion. "You planning to eat those pancakes, sweetheart, or drown them and collect the insurance?" Lily giggled. "Daddy says it's art." Ruth looked at Marcus. "Your daddy has been wrong before." "Frequently," Marcus admitted. Ruth smiled, but her gaze lingered on him a second longer than necessary. She had a way of seeing past whatever face he wore in public. Maybe it was because her husband had come home from Vietnam with the same distant stare Marcus sometimes caught in his own reflection. Maybe it was because women like Ruth, who spent their lives serving coffee to people at their most tired and unguarded, became experts in human damage. She never asked him about the war. He loved her for that. The diner was full but calm. Old men argued softly about high school football near the front window. A young couple shared a plate of biscuits in the corner. Harold Finch, the owner, shuffled between the kitchen and the register, complaining about the price of eggs to anyone willing to listen. It was an ordinary morning, and Marcus tried to let himself believe in it. Then the woman at table 7 dropped her spoon. It was a small sound, almost swallowed by the murmur of the diner, but Marcus heard it because he heard everything. He had spent too many years staying alive by noticing what changed in a room. The woman had been there when he and Lily arrived, sitting alone with a cup of coffee she had barely touched. Marcus had noticed her the way he noticed exits, reflections in windows, and men who wore jackets too heavy for the weather. She was in her early 40s, maybe older, with dark hair pulled back loosely and gray at the temples. Her coat was plain, her shoes worn, her face pale with the exhaustion of someone who had slept badly for too many nights in a row. She had ordered toast and coffee, then spent 20 minutes looking at neither. Instead, she watched the door. Every time the bell above it rang, her shoulders tightened. Every time it was just another farmer, another family, another church couple, she breathed again, but never fully relaxed. Marcus had seen fear before. Not worry, not sadness. Fear. The kind that lived in the spine. Lily did not notice. She was busy rearranging bacon into a smiley face. Marcus told himself the woman's trouble was none of his business. He was not a soldier anymore. He was not responsible for every frightened stranger in the world. His responsibility sat across from him in a yellow sweater licking syrup off her thumb. Still, his eyes drifted back to table 7. The woman bent to pick up the spoon, and when she straightened, Marcus saw her hand slip toward the purse beside her knee, gripping it like a lifeline. Before he could think too long about it, the bell above the diner door rang again. This time, the room changed. 3 men entered together, and they brought cold with them despite the warm October sun outside. The first was tall and silver-haired, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked too expensive for Brookhaven and too clean for a Sunday morning diner. He had a narrow face, calm eyes, and a smile so controlled it seemed manufactured rather than felt. Behind him came a shorter man with a thick neck and scarred knuckles, his gaze flat and restless. The third was lean, dark-haired, and almost invisible in the way truly dangerous men could be invisible. He did not stare. He measured. Windows, doors, people, distances. Marcus felt the old part of himself wake up. Not all at once, not dramatically. It simply opened its eyes. The conversations around the diner softened without anyone knowing why. Ruth paused with the coffee pot in her hand. Harold stopped complaining mid-sentence. The 3 men did not wait to be seated. They did not look at the chalkboard specials or acknowledge Ruth's automatic, "sit anywhere you like." Their attention moved across the room and locked on table 7. The woman went still. Her coffee cup hovered halfway to her mouth, trembling so hard the surface rippled. The silver-haired man smiled. Claire Whitmore. The name cut through the diner like a blade hidden inside velvet. Marcus watched the woman flinch. Not because she was surprised, because she had been expecting this moment and still was not ready for it. Lily looked up, her smile fading. Daddy Marcus lowered his coffee cup slowly. His first instinct was to reach across the table, take Lily's hand, and leave. That was what a good father would do. Remove the child. Avoid the threat. Let adults with badges handle men in expensive suits. But no badges were coming. Not yet. And the woman at table 7 looked as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. The silver-haired man walked toward her, each step quiet, deliberate, confident. His companions spread slightly to either side, not enough to seem obvious to the average customer, but enough to block paths. The short one kept his right hand near his jacket. The lean one watched the room with empty patience. Marcus knew that formation. He knew intimidation disguised as conversation. He knew violence waiting politely for permission. "I don't want trouble," the woman whispered. Her voice was barely loud enough to reach Marcus, but he heard it. The silver-haired man stopped beside her table. "Then you should not have run." Around the diner, people looked down at their plates. That was how evil often won, Marcus thought. Not because everyone agreed with it, but because decent people convinced themselves it was safer not to see. He felt Lily's small foot brush his under the table. She was scared now. He could see it in her eyes, wide and searching his face for instructions. Marcus smiled at her, or tried to. "Sweetheart," he said quietly, "why don't you go ask Miss Ruth for some extra napkins?" Lily frowned. "But we have napkins. Please." The word came out gentle, but there was something under it that she recognized. She slid from the booth reluctantly, looking back twice as she crossed toward the counter. Ruth moved before Marcus had to ask, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder and drawing her close. Marcus waited until his daughter was away from the table. Then he stood. The legs of his chair scraped against the floor, loud in the sudden hush. The silver-haired man turned his head. So did the others. Marcus felt every eye in the diner shift to him, and with that attention came a memory he did not want: dust rising after an explosion, a radio screaming in his ear, a young private bleeding into his hands while Marcus promised help was coming, though he knew it was not. He had spent years trying to bury that man, the one who made decisions under fire and lived with the cost. But the man was still there. He had only been waiting. "Wrong table," Marcus said, his voice calm enough to surprise even himself. "Wrong day, gentlemen." The silver-haired man studied him with mild curiosity, as if Marcus were a dog that had unexpectedly spoken. "Excuse me, the lady looks like she wants to finish her breakfast in peace." The short man gave a humorless laugh. The lean one did not move at all. The woman at table 7 looked at Marcus with horror, not relief, as if he had just stepped onto a mine she had been trying to avoid. "This doesn't concern you," she said quickly. "Please sit down." Marcus did not. The silver-haired man's smile widened by a fraction. "Listen to her, mister." He let the question hang. Marcus said nothing. Names were leverage. He had learned that long ago. But the man's eyes sharpened, amused. "Mr. Marcus Hale," he said softly. The diner seemed to shrink around Marcus. Ruth's hand tightened on Lily's shoulder. Lily whispered something he could not hear. Marcus kept his face still, but inside something cold moved through him. He had not given his name. "That is you, isn't it?" the man continued. "Formerly of the 75th Ranger Regiment, decorated, discharged, widower, carpenter, devoted father." His gaze flicked toward Lily, and that was the moment Marcus stopped seeing him as a threat in the room and started seeing him as a target. "Careful," Marcus said. One word: low. The short man shifted. The lean one's hand twitched near his side. The silver-haired man lifted both hands slightly, pretending innocence. "No disrespect intended. I admire family men. They understand consequences better than most." The woman pushed back from table 7 so abruptly her chair nearly fell. "Adrian!" "Leave him out of this, Adrian." Now Marcus had a name. The silver-haired man turned back to her. You lost the privilege of making requests when you disappeared with property that does not belong to you. Property. Her voice shook, but anger burned beneath it. Is that what you call it? Adrian's face hardened for the first time. The mask slipped only a second, but Marcus saw what waited underneath. Not irritation, not pride. Hunger. Control. The kind of cruelty that did not erupt, but calculated. You have something my associates require, Adrian said. You will return it and we will leave this charming establishment without further unpleasantness. Marcus noticed the woman's hand move toward her purse again. Adrian noticed too. So did the men with him. The air tightened. Marcus counted distances without meaning to. 8 feet to Adrian, 12 to the short man, 15 to the lean one. Lily was behind the counter with Ruth, too exposed if bullets started flying. Front door behind the men, kitchen exit to the left, emergency exit near the restrooms probably blocked by stacked supply boxes because Harold was careless about everything except pie recipes. Bad room, bad odds, too many civilians. Whatever this is, Marcus said, you can take it outside. Adrian looked at him with new interest. Brave, or uninformed. I've been both. Then allow me to inform you. Adrian leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping, though everyone in the diner seemed to hear him anyway. Miss Whitmore has involved herself in business she does not understand. She has stolen documents, made accusations, and caused trouble for men who are not known for their patience. That sounds like a lawyer problem, Marcus said, not a 3 men in a diner problem. For the first time, someone in the room let out a nervous breath that might have been a laugh. Adrian ignored it. You have a daughter, Mr. Hale, a beautiful one. I suggest you consider what kind of example you wish to set for her. A wise father knows when a fight is not his. The words landed exactly where Adrian intended. Marcus felt them hit the deepest fear in him. Lily. Always Lily. Every decision he made began and ended with her. He had promised to protect her, and protection sometimes meant walking away. But Lily was watching, and so was the terrified woman whose real name Marcus now suspected was not Claire Whitmore. If he sat down, what lesson would his daughter learn? That fear was stronger than decency, that men with money and weapons could take people while everyone pretended not to notice. His heart beat once, hard. Lily, he called without looking away from Adrian. Stay with Miss Ruth. Daddy, what's happening? Her voice broke around the question. Marcus wanted to go to her. More than anything, he wanted to pick her up, carry her out the back, and drive until Brookhaven was a dot in the rearview mirror. Instead, he kept his eyes on the men. Just grown-up talk. Adrian chuckled. Children always know when adults are lying. The short man stepped closer to the woman's table. That was the mistake. Marcus moved before thought could slow him down. One step put him between the man and the woman. He did not raise his fists. He did not shout. He simply occupied the space with the quiet finality of a locked door. The short man's face twisted. Move. Marcus looked at him. No. Behind him, the woman whispered, You don't understand. They'll kill you. Marcus did not turn. Maybe. Adrian's expression changed again, and now all pretense of politeness began to drain from the room. Mr. Hale, I have been patient because I dislike unnecessary mess. But do not confuse restraint with weakness. Funny, Marcus said. I was about to tell you the same thing. The bell above the door rang again. 2 more men entered. Bigger, younger, not customers. They took positions near the entrance, blocking it with their bodies while pretending to examine the room for a table. Marcus felt the trap close. Ruth pulled Lily fully behind the counter. Harold vanished toward the kitchen, pale and shaking. Chairs scraped as a few customers tried to stand, then froze when the lean man turned his eyes toward them. Adrian sighed softly, almost regretfully. Now you have made this complicated. The woman behind Marcus reached into her purse. The short man's hand went inside his jacket. Lily screamed his name, and in that single fractured second, with his peaceful life collapsing around him and every instinct screaming danger, Marcus Hale understood the truth with perfect clarity. The war he had spent years outrunning had just walked into his daughter's favorite diner, and this time there was nowhere left to retreat. The first scream came before the first gunshot. It came from somewhere near the front window, a thin, broken sound from a woman who had only wanted coffee after church and now found herself trapped inside a room where every ordinary object had become part of a battlefield waiting to happen. Marcus Hale did not look toward the scream. He could not afford to. His eyes were locked on Nolan Graves's right hand as it slipped beneath his jacket on the tightening muscles in the man's forearm, on the slight turn of his shoulders that told Marcus the weapon was coming out low and fast. Time did what it always did when violence arrived. It stretched. It sharpened. The room became a map. Adrian Blackwell near table 7, calm but alert. Victor Kane to the left, eyes, empty, body still. Two larger men at the entrance blocking escape. Lily behind the counter with Ruth Bennett, small and terrified, her yellow sweater bright against the dull metal of the coffee machines. Claire Whitmore behind Marcus, one hand buried in her purse. Too many civilians, too many angles, too much glass. Marcus moved before anyone else finished deciding what kind of morning this would become. His left hand struck Nolan's wrist just as the gun cleared the jacket, driving the barrel downward. The shot exploded into the floor, splintering tile and sending customers shrieking beneath tables. Marcus drove his shoulder into Nolan's chest, using the man's own forward motion against him, slamming him backward into the edge of a booth. Coffee cups jumped, plates shattered. Someone prayed out loud. "Lily down!" Marcus shouted. Ruth had already pulled the girl behind the counter, pressing her against the cabinets with one hand over her head. Marcus saw it in the corner of his eye and felt both gratitude and terror twist inside him. His daughter was alive. His daughter was still in the room. That second truth was the chain around every choice he could make. Claire stumbled away from the table, her face pale but her eyes suddenly different. The fear was still there, but beneath it was calculation, discipline, purpose. She pulled a compact pistol from her purse with a practiced grip, not the panicked motion of an amateur. Marcus saw the way she checked her line of fire, the way her finger stayed indexed along the frame until she had a target. Not a helpless woman, not merely a fugitive. Trained. "Who are you?" he snapped. She ducked behind an overturned chair as Victor drew his weapon and fired twice. The first round punched through the back of the booth where Marcus had been standing. The second shattered the framed photograph of the 1987 Brookhaven baseball team on the wall behind him. Glass rained over the red vinyl seats. "Federal agent," she said, breathing hard. "Elena Rivera. Claire Whitmore is a cover." Marcus stared at her for half a heartbeat. "You brought federal trouble into a diner full of families." Pain flashed across her face, but she did not look away. "I brought evidence. They brought the guns." Another shot cracked through the air. Marcus grabbed the nearest table and flipped it onto its side, using it as poor cover as Lily cried out behind the counter. The sound of his daughter's fear cut deeper than any bullet could have. He wanted to crawl to her. He wanted to wrap himself around her and shut out the world. But the path between them was exposed, and Adrian's men were watching every movement. If Marcus ran to Lily now, he would draw fire directly to her. The right thing felt like the wrong thing. The father in him screamed one answer. The soldier in him gave another. Stay between the threat and the child. Do not lead the threat to the child. "Everybody stay down," Marcus shouted, his voice carrying the command tone he had not used in years. Customers obeyed because fear recognized authority when it heard it. Harold Finch lay flat behind the register, sobbing quietly. An old man crawled behind a booth. The young couple in the corner clung to each other under a table. Finch's diner, a place that had smelled of pancakes and coffee 5 minutes earlier, now smelled of gunpowder, burned tile, and panic. Adrian Blackwell had taken cover near table 7, but even now his suit remained almost perfectly arranged. He looked less frightened than annoyed, as if violence were an inconvenience caused by other people's poor manners. "Agent Rivera," he called, his voice smooth over the chaos. "You are making this far worse than it needs to be." Elena's jaw tightened. Marcus glanced at her. "What does he want?" She hesitated. That hesitation told him the answer was terrible. "A recorder," she said. "Names, locations, payment routes, a confession. Enough to put him away forever." Marcus looked toward Adrian, then back at her. For what Elena's fingers closed around the small device inside her jacket. For the first time, her hand shook. Children. The word changed the air. Marcus felt it land somewhere deeper than understanding. He looked toward Lily, hidden behind the counter in Ruth's arms, and suddenly, Adrian Blackwell was no longer just a dangerous man in an expensive suit. He was something older, uglier, and less human. Elena swallowed, forcing the rest out. "He runs a trafficking network across state lines. I've been chasing him for 2 years. My son Daniel found something on my laptop he shouldn't have seen. They killed him to scare me off." For a moment, even the gunfire seemed distant. Marcus saw not the diner, but Lily's bedroom, the stuffed rabbit beside her pillow, the drawings taped crookedly above her desk, the small shoes by the front door. He imagined someone like Adrian reaching toward that world, treating a child not as a soul, not as a life, but as merchandise. A cold, clean fury settled into him. It was not the hot rage that made men stupid. It was the old battlefield ice, the kind that slowed the heartbeat and cleared the hands. Until that moment, Marcus had still been thinking like a father trying to survive a disaster. Now he understood this was not a disaster. It was a line. On one side was the fragile life he had built for Lily. On the other was the kind of evil that would eventually come for someone's Lily if good people kept stepping aside. "Where's your backup?" he asked. Elena's mouth tightened. "Compromised. I sent the evidence to a contact, but the full file is still on me. I was supposed to meet a courier outside town this morning. Adrian found me first." Marcus let out a humorless breath. "So no one's coming soon?" "Not soon enough." Adrian's voice rose again. "Mr. Hale, you are a practical man. You have a daughter. I respect that. Walk her out of here. Leave Agent Rivera and her stolen property with me, and this ends for you." The offer struck exactly where Marcus was weakest. Walk Lily out. Take her home. Lock the doors. Put her in the truck and drive until the roads blurred. That was what every nerve in his body begged him to do. A good father protects his child first. A good father does not gamble his daughter's life for a stranger's mission. He looked toward the counter. Lily had lifted her head despite Ruth trying to keep her down. Tears shone on her cheeks. Her eyes found his, and in them he saw absolute trust. Not trust that he would win, not trust that he could stop bullets. Trust that he would know what was right. That was worse. That was heavier. Marcus had spent years believing that leaving the military meant he no longer had to make impossible decisions. But life had only waited. It had brought the impossible decision to a red vinyl diner booth, placed syrup on his daughter's plate, and asked him what kind of man she was watching. "If I give you Rivera," Marcus called back, "you kill her. Then you kill anyone who saw your face." Adrian smiled faintly. "You wound me." "No," Marcus said, "not yet." Nolan groaned near the booth, trying to rise. Marcus kicked the gun farther away, then dragged the man's body by the collar and used him as a barrier between the table and Victor's line of sight. Nolan cursed, but Marcus ignored him. His mind was moving now not backward into fear, but forward into options. He could not outshoot 5 armed men without a gun. He could not carry Lily through the front door. The kitchen exit was the best chance, but one of Adrian's men would expect that. The emergency exit might be blocked, but blocked did not mean impossible. Harold kept a fire axe near the restrooms, if memory served. Ruth knew the diner better than anyone. Elena had a weapon and training. Marcus had the room his hands, and the willingness to be the most dangerous distraction Adrian had ever underestimated. "How many rounds?" he asked Elena. 10 in the magazine, 1 spare. "Can you move?" "Yes." "Can you carry Lily if you have to?" Her eyes sharpened. "Yes." "Then listen carefully." Marcus shifted behind the table, keeping low. Ruth, the older waitress, looked up from behind the counter, her face white but steady. Tell me you still keep that fire axe by the restroom. Ruth's eyes widened.
Then she nodded once.
Cabinet beside the hall. On my signal, you take Lily low along the counter and get to that hall. Don't stand. Don't look back. Lily shook her head violently. No, Daddy, I'm not leaving you. The words almost broke him. Marcus forced himself to smile, though his throat felt full of glass. You remember what we say when something scary happens? Lily sobbed. Breathe first. That's right. Breathe first, then move. But Lily... His voice softened. I need you to be brave for 10 seconds. Just 10. Can you do that for me? She pressed both hands over her mouth, trying to hold herself together, and nodded. Marcus turned back to Elena. You go with them. If I draw them left, you take my daughter out. Elena stared at him. And you? I'll follow. They both knew it was a lie. For a second, the agent's mask cracked and the grieving mother looked through. Marcus, I can't let your daughter lose her father because of me.
This isn't because of you.
He looked toward Adrian. It's because of him. Adrian's patience was thinning. He gestured to Victor, who began moving along the far side of the diner, trying for a better angle. The two men at the entrance spread wider, one watching the customers, the other watching Marcus. Nolan was still half-conscious on the floor, but not out of the fight for long. Every second made the trap tighter. Marcus reached for the closest object without taking his eyes off Victor. His hand closed around a heavy glass sugar dispenser. Ridiculous weapon. Better than empty air. He thought of his workshop of unfinished chairs waiting beneath canvas of the table he had promised to build for Lily's dollhouse, of pancakes cooling on a plate that now had dust and glass in the syrup. He thought of Sarah, and what she would say if she could see him now. Protect her. Not just her body, her heart, her belief that good still exists. That was when Marcus felt the shift inside him. Until now, he had been trying to escape the conflict, trying to keep his old life separate from his new one, trying to be only a father and not the man war had made. But maybe the answer was not choosing one or the other. Maybe Lily did not need a father who had never been dangerous. Maybe she needed a father who knew exactly how dangerous the world could be and still chose love instead of fear. He did not have to become the soldier again. He had to become all of himself, the father, the carpenter, the widower, the veteran, the man who built things and the man who could break what threatened them. Marcus looked at Elena. That recorder, if you get out, can you end this? She nodded. Yes. Then that's the mission. Elena held his gaze. Something passed between them, not friendship, not trust exactly, but recognition. Two parents, both wounded, both standing at the edge of a choice that would define what remained of their lives. Adrian stepped into view, gun in hand now, all civility gone from his face. Last chance, Mr. Hale. Your daughter walks away or she watches what happens when a man mistakes stubbornness for courage. Marcus rose just enough for Adrian to see his face. You made one mistake. Adrian tilted his head. Only one. You thought I was trying to be a hero. Marcus tightened his grip on the sugar dispenser. I'm not. In one sudden motion, he hurled the glass container at the overhead light above Victor. It struck with a sharp crack. The bulb burst, plunging half the diner into flickering shadow. At the same time, Marcus flipped the table forward and charged left, not toward escape, but toward the men blocking it. Gunfire erupted. Customers screamed. Ruth moved with Lily. Elena moved with Ruth. Marcus felt a round tear through the edge of his flannel, felt heat graze his ribs, but he did not slow. He drove into the first man at the entrance with all the force of a father who had run out of fear and found purpose beneath it. The man slammed into the doorframe. The second turned his weapon toward the counter, and Marcus knew in that instant the plan had already begun to fail. Elena fired once. The shot struck the man's shoulder and spun him sideways. Ruth dragged Lily into the hallway. Lily screamed again, but she was moving. That was enough. Marcus seized the wounded man's wrist, twisted until the gun clattered across the floor and kicked it beneath a booth. Victor fired from the shadows. Elena returned fire, forcing him back. Adrian shouted orders, his polished control cracking under the pressure of people refusing to behave like prey. For the first time since he had entered Finch's diner, Adrian Blackwell looked uncertain. Not afraid, not yet, but uncertain. Marcus saw it and understood that was where the fight could be won. Not with strength, not with bullets, with disruption. Adrian's power depended on people obeying the story he wrote for them, that he was untouchable, that fear was wisdom, that survival meant surrender. Marcus had believed part of that story for one terrible minute when Adrian offered him a way out with Lily. Now he rejected it completely. The way out was not surrender. The way out was making Adrian react, making him careless, making him angry enough to make mistakes. From the hallway came Ruth's voice, strained but alive. Marcus' doors jammed the emergency exit, blocked or rusted or both. Lily was still not out. Marcus's stomach dropped, but his mind kept moving. The kitchen. If the hall failed, the kitchen window might work. Too small for an adult, maybe not for Lily. "Elena!" he shouted. "Kitchen window!" Elena understood immediately. She fired 2 controlled shots toward Victor's cover, then retreated toward the hall. Marcus backed after her, dragging a chair into the aisle to slow pursuit. Adrian's face twisted with fury. "Do not let them leave!" The command turned the diner into motion again. Nolan staggered up from the floor. Victor shifted right. One of the entrance men clutched his bleeding shoulder and reached for a backup weapon. Marcus saw all of it, and beneath the terror, beneath the pain beginning to spread along his side, a strange clarity filled him. The conflict had reached its peak, but for the first time since the bell above the door rang, Marcus was no longer simply reacting. He had made his decision. Lily would get out. Elena would get the evidence out. Adrian Blackwell would not walk away believing good people always stepped aside. Marcus grabbed the fallen chair with both hands, turned toward the men advancing through the shattered diner, and prepared to buy the seconds that mattered most. Marcus Hale did not charge because he believed he could win. He charged because Lily needed 10 seconds. Elena Rivera needed a path, and evil men only needed one clear shot to turn every promise he had ever made into a lie. The chair in his hands was old, heavy, and badly balanced, but in that moment it became a shield, a battering ram, and the last thin wall between Adrian Blackwell's men and the hallway where his daughter was trapped. He drove forward through the shattered aisle of Finch's diner, boots grinding broken glass into the floor ribs, burning where a bullet had grazed him, heart beating with the hard, steady rhythm of a man who had stopped asking whether he was afraid. Fear was there. Fear had been there since Lily screamed his name, but fear no longer gave orders. Marcus did. Nolan Graves came at him, first blood running from his nose, one hand reaching for the knife strapped beneath his jacket. Marcus saw the movement, angled the chair, and slammed its wooden legs into Nolan's chest. The impact knocked the air from the man's lungs and sent him crashing backward into a table covered with spilled coffee and ruined pancakes. Before Nolan could recover, Marcus stepped in and struck again, this time with the chair's edge across his wrist. The knife fell. Marcus kicked it beneath the counter. "Stay down," he growled. Nolan answered with a curse and tried to rise anyway. Marcus had no time to finish him. Victor Kane was moving along the far wall using overturned booths as cover, trying to get a line of sight into the hallway. Marcus hurled the chair at him. Victor ducked, but the chair struck the wall beside his head and exploded into splinters, forcing him back long enough for Elena to move. "Kitchen," Marcus shouted. "Take Lily through the kitchen. The hallway door is jammed," Ruth Bennett yelled from somewhere beyond the counter. Her voice was strained but steady, the voice of a woman who had decided she would rather be brave than helpless. "I can't get it open." Marcus looked toward the kitchen pass-through. Harold Finch was crouched beneath it, pale and shaking, one hand pressed over his mouth. Behind him, stainless steel counters gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights. Beyond that was the rear prep area, the small storage room, and a narrow window above the sink that Marcus had noticed a dozen times during ordinary breakfasts without ever imagining it might become his daughter's way out of a gunfight. Harold Marcus barked. The owner flinched as if struck. "The kitchen window. Does it open?" Harold stared at him, uncomprehending. Marcus shouted again. "Does it open?" "It sticks," Harold cried. "Everything in this place sticks." "Then unstick it." Elena appeared at the end of the counter, one arm wrapped around Lily, pistol in her other hand. Lily's face was wet with tears. Her yellow sweater was dusted with powdered sugar and tiny bits of plaster. The sight nearly broke Marcus in half. She was trying to be brave. He could see it. She was breathing fast, mouth trembling, but she was not fighting Elena, not running toward him, not freezing. 10 seconds, he had asked her. She had given him more than that. "Daddy," she cried. Marcus forced his voice to stay calm. "You're doing great, sweetheart. Stay with Miss Rivera. Come with us, I'm right behind you." It was the second lie he had told her that morning, the second one that tasted like blood. Adrian Blackwell's voice cut across the diner. "Touch that exit and the next shot goes into the child." Everything stopped. Even Nolan, half rising from the floor, froze. Marcus turned slowly. Adrian stood near the middle of the diner, now no longer hiding behind polished manners. His gun was raised, not aimed at Marcus, not aimed at Elena, but angled toward the kitchen. His face was calm again, and that calmness was worse than rage. Rage could be pushed. Calm could calculate. "You think I won't?" Adrian asked. "You think because she is young, because she is crying, because this room is full of witnesses, I will hesitate?" Marcus felt the old ice return, but beneath it was something darker. A man could threaten him. A man could shoot him. A man could drag every ghost from his past and throw it at his feet. But the moment Adrian aimed words at Lily, something inside Marcus changed from resistance into certainty. Adrian Blackwell could not be allowed to leave this diner with power intact. Not alive in spirit, not untouchable in reputation, not still believing that children were tools to bend adults. "You do that," Marcus said softly, "and you lose the only thing keeping me reasonable." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "You are in no position to threaten me." "I'm not threatening you." Marcus took one slow step sideways, placing himself more directly between Adrian's gun and the kitchen. "I'm explaining what happens next." Victor emerged behind a booth, weapon ready. Elena raised her pistol at once. The two stared at each other across the ruined room, both trained, both waiting for the other to make a mistake. Nolan dragged himself to his knees. One of the men near the entrance, Mason Dre, had wrapped a napkin around his bleeding shoulder and was reaching for a backup weapon at his ankle. Caleb Knox, the largest of them, was moving toward the counter to cut off Elena's retreat. Marcus counted them again. Adrian armed, Victor armed, Caleb advancing, Mason wounded but dangerous, Nolan close enough to become a problem. Too many, still too many. But they were spread out now, angry, reacting. The formation that had entered the diner like a machine had begun to break into desperate parts. That was something. Elena, Marcus said without looking back. "When I move, you move. Marcus, he has the angle." "Not for long," Adrian smiled thinly. "This heroic performance is becoming tiresome." He shifted the gun slightly and Marcus knew the shot was coming. Not at Lily, not yet. At him. A disabling shot, probably. Adrian wanted control restored. Marcus moved first. He grabbed a metal napkin dispenser from the nearest table and hurled it not at Adrian, but at the coffee urn behind the counter. The dispenser struck the glass gauge and cracked it. Scalding coffee burst out in a dark stream, splashing across the floor and sending steam rolling upward. Caleb, advancing too close to the counter, slipped as Ruth swung the heavy coffee pot with both hands and smashed it against his forearm. He roared, his weapon clattering away. "Run!" Ruth shouted. Elena shoved Lily toward Harold. Window. Now Harold scrambled to his feet, suddenly animated by fear and shame, and perhaps the realization that bravery sometimes arrived late but still mattered. He grabbed a dish towel, wrapped it around his hand, and began forcing the kitchen window upward. It groaned, stuck, shifted half an inch, then jammed again. Lily looked back. Marcus saw her eyes through the steam. He wanted to tell her not to look. He wanted to tell her that fathers were not supposed to appear like this, bleeding, violent, desperate, surrounded by broken things. But there was no time for mercy. Victor fired. Elena returned fire. Both shots went wild as customers screamed beneath tables. Marcus dove behind a booth as Adrian's bullet punched through the air where his chest had been. He hit the floor hard, pain flaring white along his side. For a second, the room tilted. He tasted copper. His body, older and more damaged than he liked to admit, warned him that willpower did not make a man invincible. Nolan lunged from the side, tackling him around the waist. They crashed into the aisle, grappling among glass and spilled syrup. Nolan was strong, trained, and furious. He drove a fist into Marcus's ribs exactly where the bullet had grazed him. Pain exploded through Marcus's body. His grip weakened. Nolan's hand closed around his throat. "Should have stayed at breakfast," Nolan snarled. Marcus could not answer. He drove his thumb into the wound on Nolan's wrist, felt the man's grip falter, then slammed his forehead into Nolan's face. Once, twice. Nolan reeled and Marcus rolled, pinning the man's arm beneath his knee. He saw the fallen knife beneath the counter too far away. He saw Caleb recovering near Ruth. He saw Adrian turning toward the kitchen again. Lily was still inside. The window was still not open. Then the unexpected happened. The diner's front door opened. For one impossible second, Marcus thought another customer had walked in by mistake. Instead, a teenage boy in a delivery jacket froze in the doorway, holding a cardboard box of produce earbuds still in his ears, eyes widening at the sight of guns, blood, overturned tables, and people crawling across the floor. "Get down!" Marcus shouted. Too late. Mason Dre seized the boy from behind, dragging him inside and locking an arm around his neck. The produce box hit the floor, apples rolling across the blood-streaked tile like bright red marbles. Adrian's expression changed instantly. The uncertainty vanished. A new hostage had given him back the room. "Excellent timing," Adrian said. Mason pressed a gun beneath the boy's chin. The teenager shook so hard his knees nearly buckled. "Please," he whispered. "I just deliver from my uncle. I don't know anything." Marcus's stomach sank. This was the event that shattered the plan. Lily was almost at the kitchen window. Elena was almost clear. But another child had just been pulled into Adrian's hands. Not Lily, but someone's son, someone's nephew, someone who had left home that morning thinking his biggest problem was a box of bruised apples. Elena's face went rigid. Marcus saw the wound open in her eyes before she could hide it. Daniel, her dead son. The same age, maybe. The same terror. Adrian saw it too because predators always saw pain they could use. "Agent Rivera," he called. "Come back into the dining room with the recorder or this boy dies first." Elena stopped moving. Lily was halfway onto the sink counter, Harold trying to lift her toward the narrow window. Ruth had Caleb's dropped weapon kicked behind her, but she did not know how to use it. Victor had shifted his aim toward Elena. Mason held the teenager. Adrian held the room. Marcus felt the plan collapsing like a rotten floor beneath his feet. "Do not stop," he said to Elena. She did not look at him. Her eyes were locked on the boy. "He's a kid. So is Lily, I know." Her voice broke on the words. Adrian began counting. 10, the boy sobbed. 9, Lily cried from the kitchen. "Daddy, help him!" That was the cruelest blow. Marcus closed his eyes for the smallest fraction of a second. He had wanted to protect Lily's body, but there she was, still seeing the world with a heart he had not yet failed to preserve, asking him to save someone else's child. Sarah's voice seemed to echo from some quiet room in his memory. "Don't teach her fear when you can teach her courage." Marcus opened his eyes. His thinking changed again, deeper this time. The mission was not only Lily. It had never been only Lily. Not since Adrian spoke the word consequences and pointed his evil toward children. If Marcus saved his daughter by letting another child die in front of her, what exactly had he saved? Her heartbeat, yes. But what would happen to her soul when she remembered the boy they abandoned? He could not protect her innocence by betraying it. He had to solve both, somehow. "Elena," he said quietly, "give me the recorder." She stared at him. "What?" "Trust me, I barely know you. You know I'm not letting him kill that boy." Adrian reached 5. Elena hesitated only once more, then slid the small recorder across the floor. It spun beneath a table and stopped near Marcus's hand. Adrian's eyes followed it hungry. Marcus picked it up and stood slowly, one arm wrapped around his injured ribs. Nolan groaned at his feet but did not rise. Marcus called, "You want this? You deal with me." Adrian smiled. "At last, some sense. Let the boy go. Bring it here first." "No." Marcus held up the recorder between two fingers. "You shoot him, I smash it. You shoot me, my hand closes and it breaks. You send anyone toward the kitchen. Rivera shoots Victor before he gets a second round off. Then Ruth picks up that gun by the counter and maybe she misses, maybe she doesn't. Either way, this gets messy fast." Ruth's eyes dropped to the weapon behind her. Her face hardened. Elena adjusted her stance, aiming at Victor. Harold stopped struggling with the window and stared terrified, but ready to move Lily again if given the chance. Marcus had turned the room into a web of consequences, thin threads, fragile threads, but enough to slow a man like Adrian who survived by calculating risk. Adrian's gaze moved from Marcus to Elena to Ruth to the recorder to the teenage hostage. "You are bluffing." "Maybe." Marcus tightened his hand around the device. "But you've been wrong about me all morning." For the first time, the teenage boy seemed to understand that the bleeding man in the flannel shirt was trying to save him. His eyes met Marcus's, pleading and stunned. Marcus gave him the smallest nod. "Be ready." Adrian noticed. His smile disappeared. Mason helped the boy. Mason's finger tightened. Marcus threw the recorder into the air. Every eye followed it. Adrian lunged instinctively toward the evidence. Mason looked up for half a second. Half a second was enough. The teenage boy dropped his weight the way Marcus had silently signaled, slipping beneath Mason's arm. Marcus surged forward despite the pain driving his shoulder into Mason's injured side. Elena fired at Victor's cover, pinning him down. Ruth grabbed Caleb's dropped gun with both hands, and though she did not fire, aimed it with enough trembling determination to make Caleb freeze. Harold finally forced the kitchen window open with a metallic shriek. "Go!" he shouted. Lily disappeared through the narrow opening into the alley beyond. Marcus heard her cry out as she landed outside, but then he heard her voice alive, calling his name through the wall. Alive. The word filled him with strength he did not have. The recorder hit the floor, bounced once, and slid beneath Adrian's shoe. He bent for it, but Marcus reached him first. They collided in the center of the diner. Marcus wounded and exhausted Adrian, fueled by fury and desperation. The two men crashed into table 7, the place where it had all begun. The coffee cup Elena had been holding earlier shattered beneath them. Adrian clawed for the recorder. Marcus grabbed his wrist. "You should have walked away," Adrian hissed. Marcus, bleeding and shaking, forced the man's hand down against the broken ceramic. "So should you." Outside, Lily was alive. Inside, the teenage boy crawled behind Ruth. Elena advanced from the kitchen, pistol steady grief and purpose burning together in her eyes. The plan had failed, changed, and become something more dangerous than escape. Now, Marcus understood the only way to end the conflict was not merely to run from Adrian Blackwell. It was to take away the power that made everyone else run. And as sirens finally began to wail faintly in the distance, Marcus tightened his grip on Adrian's wrist and prepared for the hardest fight yet. The sirens were still far away when Marcus Hale realized that surviving the next minute would not be enough. Survival had been his first instinct, the old animal command that lived beneath thought and language. Protect Lily. Get her out. Keep breathing. Stop the gun. But now Lily was outside the kitchen window, alive in the alley beyond the diner wall, and the sound of her crying his name reached him like a rope thrown across deep water. She was safe for the moment, but Adrian Blackwell was still in front of him, still fighting for the recorder, still carrying the kind of darkness that did not disappear simply because one child had escaped it. Marcus had spent years believing peace meant staying away from violence. He had built chairs, tables, shelves, and a quiet life because he thought if his hands kept making useful things, they might forget what it felt like to break bones and hold rifles and drag wounded men through dust. But peace, he understood now, was not the absence of danger. Peace was what good people protected after danger showed its face. Adrian twisted beneath him, elegant mask, gone silver hair streaked with sweat, one cheek cut by broken ceramic. His eyes were no longer calm. They were furious, humiliated and afraid, in a way men like him rarely allowed anyone to witness. "You have no idea what you've done," Adrian hissed, straining for the recorder beneath the table. Marcus pinned his wrist harder against the shattered coffee cup. Pain screamed through Marcus's ribs, through his shoulder, through the old scars along his back that seemed to remember every battlefield at once. "I know exactly what I've done," he said. "I stopped running." Adrian's free hand shot toward Marcus's wound. His fingers dug into the torn flesh along Marcus's side, and white-hot agony burst through him. Marcus nearly blacked out. The room narrowed to Adrian's face, the blood on the floor, the recorder inches away, and the sharp, terrible knowledge that his strength was almost gone. Adrian felt it too. He smiled through blood. "You're tired, Mr. Hale. So are you. I have men. Not enough." Elena Rivera's voice came from behind them, cold and steady. Marcus did not turn, but he saw Adrian's eyes shift. Elena stood near the end of the counter, both hands locked around her pistol, feet planted, face pale with grief and fury. Victor Kane was down behind a booth, wounded but alive, his weapon kicked out of reach. Nolan Graves lay curled near the aisle, coughing blood and curses. Caleb Knox was frozen beside the counter with Ruth Bennett aiming his own fallen gun at him, her arms trembling, but her eyes hard enough to hold him in place. Mason Dre had collapsed near the entrance, clutching his injured side, while the teenage delivery boy crawled toward the shelter of the booths. The machine Adrian had brought into Finch's diner had broken into pieces. For the first time, he was almost alone. "Agent Rivera," Adrian said, forcing smoothness back into his voice, "you still need me alive if you want the network." Elena's jaw tightened. "I need you breathing. I don't need you comfortable." Marcus reached with his left hand, fingers stretching toward the recorder. Adrian lunged at the same moment, and the two men rolled hard into the leg of table 7. The recorder skidded into the open. Elena moved, but Adrian was faster than Marcus expected. He kicked backward, striking Elena's knee just enough to throw off her aim, then dragged Marcus with him as he surged toward the device. Marcus grabbed him by the jacket and held on. The fabric tore. Adrian's fingers closed around the recorder, his face lit with desperate triumph. "It ends now," he said. He lifted the device as if to smash it against the floor. Marcus saw Elena's expression collapse not from fear for herself, but from the sight of 2 years of work, her murdered son's justice, and the hope of countless missing children about to be destroyed in one cruel motion. That look gave Marcus the last strength he had. He caught Adrian's wrist with both hands and drove it down, not toward the floor, but against the edge of the table. The recorder flew free, spinning toward Elena. She dropped to one knee and caught it against her chest as if catching a living thing. Adrian roared and slammed his elbow into Marcus's temple. The world flashed black. Marcus fell sideways, striking the floor hard. His body refused to rise. Somewhere beyond the walls, Lily screamed again. That sound reached places pain could not. Marcus pushed one palm against the blood-slick floor. His arm shook. He tried to lift himself and failed. Adrian stood above him, breathing hard, his polished shoes planted among broken glass and spilled syrup. He no longer looked like a powerful businessman. He looked like what he was, a frightened predator cornered by people who had finally stopped pretending he was untouchable. "You should have taken your daughter and left," Adrian said. He bent and picked up Nolan's fallen knife. Elena raised her gun. "Drop it." Adrian smiled, but it was wild now. Shoot me and you lose every name I haven't said, every safe house, every buyer, every account. Your little recorder is only the beginning, Agent Rivera. Kill me and children stay missing. The words struck Elena exactly where he aimed them. Marcus saw her hesitate. Not because Adrian deserved mercy, but because the mission did. Elena wanted justice for Daniel, but she also wanted the living children found. Adrian knew it. He was using the truth as a shield. That was his gift, taking every decent impulse and turning it into a chain. You won't shoot, Adrian whispered. You're still a mother. Elena's face trembled. Marcus saw the wound beneath the badge. He saw a woman who had lost a son and kept walking because stopping would mean his death had no meaning. He saw someone who had carried grief like a weapon until she no longer knew how to put it down. Elena, Marcus said from the floor. His voice was rough, barely there. Don't let him make you become him. Adrian glanced down at him with contempt. And what are you offering? Forgiveness. Marcus pulled in a breath that felt like fire. No. He forced himself onto one knee. Consequences. In the distance, the sirens grew louder. Red and blue light began to flicker faintly against the broken front windows. Adrian heard them too. His eyes darted toward the entrance, toward Mason, toward Caleb, toward every failed escape route. His control was gone. Now he had only desperation. He grabbed Arthur Mills, the elderly man who had been frozen behind the front booth, and yanked him upright with the knife at his throat. Arthur gasped, his glasses crooked, his thin hands shaking in the air. Back away, Adrian shouted. All of you! Elena froze. Ruth sucked in a breath. Marcus felt a wave of exhaustion so heavy it almost took him down again. Another hostage. Another innocent life placed between Adrian and accountability. This was the pattern. This was the truth of men like him. They never stood alone when judgment came. They always dragged someone weaker in front of them. Marcus looked at Arthur, and the old man looked back with wet, terrified eyes. In that gaze, Marcus saw the question everyone in the diner had been asking since the doorbell first rang. Will someone save me? Earlier that morning, Marcus might have answered with action before understanding why. Now he understood. The world did not change because evil grew ashamed. It changed because someone interrupted it. Marcus lowered his hands slowly. Adrian, he said, look at me. Adrian kept the knife pressed against Arthur's neck. I said, back away. You're done. I decide when I'm done. No, Marcus said. That's the part you don't understand. You walked in here thinking every person in this room was a tool, a witness, a hostage, a problem. But they're people, and people are harder to control once they remember that. Adrian's eyes flicked around the room. It was a mistake, a small one, but Marcus saw Ruth shift. He saw Elena adjust her grip. He saw the teenage delivery boy still on the floor near a spilled trail of apples reach silently for one of them. Marcus kept talking, holding Adrian's attention. You wanted fear. You got it. But fear doesn't always make people obey. Sometimes it teaches them what they're willing to lose. Adrian sneered. Pretty words from a bleeding carpenter. No, Marcus said. A father. The delivery boy threw the apple. It struck Adrian's cheek. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to make him flinch. Arthur dropped his weight at the same instant, old knees buckling as Ruth shouted, Now! Elena fired once. The bullet hit Adrian's knife hand. The blade fell. Marcus rose with the last of his strength and drove into Adrian like a collapsing wall. They crashed through the broken remains of Table 7 and hit the floor. This time Adrian did not rise. Marcus pinned him there, forearm across his back knee between his shoulders, every muscle shaking. Adrian tried to curse, but Marcus pressed harder. Stay down, Marcus said. For once in your life, stay down. The front doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the diner with weapons raised, followed by local police shouting commands. Ruth dropped Caleb's gun and lifted both hands, then immediately pointed at Adrian. That one, she snapped. That devil right there. Officers swarmed the room. Victor, Nolan, Mason, and Caleb were disarmed and cuffed. Adrian was dragged from beneath Marcus, bleeding, furious, still trying to speak like a man giving orders. No one listened. That was when Marcus finally fell. Not dramatically, not like in the movies, but quietly, as if every bone had simply agreed that the work was finished. He sank onto his side beside the broken table, staring at the ceiling where one light flickered above him. The diner sounded far away now, voices blurred, boots moved around him. Someone called for paramedics. Elena appeared above him, recorder clutched in one hand, her pistol lowered in the other. Her face was wet, though whether from sweat or tears Marcus could not tell. "We have him," she said. "We have the evidence." Marcus tried to nod. "Lily, outside, alive. Ruth's got her." The relief that moved through him was so powerful it hurt worse than the wound. His eyes closed. "Don't let her see me like this." Elena's expression broke. "Marcus, please." But Lily had never been easy to stop when love pulled her forward. A moment later, her small voice cut through the chaos. Daddy Marcus opened his eyes. Lily ran between agents and broken chairs past Ruth's reaching hand and dropped to her knees beside him. Her face crumpled when she saw the blood. "No, no, no, Daddy, you said you were right behind me." Marcus lifted a trembling hand and touched her cheek. "I was trying to be," she sobbed, pressing her forehead against his arm. "You lied." The accusation was small, devastated, and completely fair. Marcus had faced gunfire without flinching, but that broke something open in him. "I did," he whispered. "I'm sorry." "You promised." "I know." His voice shook now, not from pain, but from the weight of what he had asked a child to survive. "I wanted you safe." Lily looked at him through tears. "I wanted you safe, too." No battlefield had ever taught him how to answer that. He had spent the morning making choices like a soldier measuring lives against seconds, angles, and exits. But now the battle was over, and the cost sat beside him in a yellow sweater, learning too early that love could be brave and still terrifying. Marcus looked at her and understood that protecting Lily could not mean hiding every truth from her. The world had already shown itself. Now his job was not to pretend it had not happened, but to help her carry it without letting it harden her heart. "I was scared," he told her. Lily blinked. "You were more scared than I've ever been." Her small fingers tightened around his. "But you fought them. Because being scared doesn't mean we stop doing what's right." Lily cried harder, but she did not look away. Marcus saw something settle in her, not peace, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. The beginning of a wound that could become wisdom if handled with love. Paramedics reached him then, easing Lily back just enough to work. She resisted until Marcus squeezed her hand. "Stay with Ruth. I'm not leaving you." "That's not a lie. That's not a lie." Elena stood nearby as agents took her statement. She should have looked victorious. Instead, she looked hollowed out. When the paramedics lifted Marcus onto a stretcher, she walked beside him until they reached the ambulance doors. For a moment, neither spoke. Around them, Adrian Blackwell was shoved into a federal vehicle. His men followed in separate cars. Reporters had not arrived yet. The town had not yet begun turning trauma into legend. There was only broken glass, cold coffee, and survivors trying to understand why they were still breathing. "My son's name was Daniel," Elena said quietly. Marcus turned his head toward her. He was 13. He liked astronomy. He thought every problem could be solved if you had a big enough telescope. Her mouth trembled. "For 2 years I thought catching Adrian would make me feel like his mother again. But in there, when he grabbed that boy, all I could think was that I was about to lose Daniel twice." Marcus listened too tired to offer easy comfort, wise enough not to try. "You didn't," he said. "You saved him. We saved him." She looked toward Lily, who stood wrapped in Ruth's arms near the police line. "And she saved us too, when she asked you to help him." Marcus followed her gaze. Lily looked smaller than ever and older than she should. "Yeah," he whispered. "She did." Elena reached into her coat and held up the recorder. "This goes straight to Washington. No more compromised channels. No more delays. Good. There are names on here, Marcus. Places. Children we can still find. He closed his eyes for a second. The pain was enormous, but beneath it was something he had not felt in years. Not happiness. Not relief exactly. Purpose. Not the military kind handed down through orders and flags. Something quieter. A choice made freely. A line held because it mattered. Then find them, he said. Elena nodded. I will. The ambulance doors began to close, but Lily broke away from Ruth and ran forward. An officer tried to stop her. Ruth nearly took his arm off with a glare. Lily climbed into the ambulance beside Marcus, refusing to be separated. The paramedic looked ready to object, then saw Marcus's face and said nothing. Lily sat near his head, holding his hand with both of hers. As the ambulance pulled away from Finch's diner, Marcus watched red and blue lights flicker across her tear-streaked face. "Daddy," she whispered. "Yeah, sweetheart. Are the bad men gone?" Marcus thought of Adrian in cuffs, of the recorder in Elena's hand, of all the children still waiting to be found, of the long road ahead for everyone who had survived the morning. "Some of them," he said honestly. Lily absorbed that. "Will more come?" His first instinct was to say no, to rebuild the safe, simple world with one comforting lie. But he had lied enough for one day. "Maybe," he said, "but so will good people." Lily leaned her forehead against his hand. "Like you." Marcus looked at his daughter, at the child he had tried to shield from everything, and instead had shown the cost of courage. "Like us," he said. Outside Brookhaven blurred past the ambulance windows, quiet houses, autumn trees, church parking lots, ordinary streets where people were only beginning to hear that something terrible had happened at Finch's diner. Marcus knew the consequences were just beginning. There would be questions, nightmares, hospital rooms, investigations, scars, and nights when Lily would wake crying because a doorbell in a dream sounded like the one above the diner. There would be guilt, too heavy and patient. He would wonder whether he had done enough, whether he had risked too much, whether Lily would someday remember him as brave or reckless. But as her small hand held his, Marcus also knew something else. He had spent years trying to build peace by hiding from the man he used to be. Now he understood healing would not come from denial. It would come from reconciliation. Father and soldier, builder and fighter, fear and courage, past and present. He was not whole because he had escaped violence. He would become whole by choosing what his strength was for. And that morning, in a broken diner filled with shattered glass and saved lives, Marcus Hale had finally chosen. 3 months after the shooting at Finch's diner, Marcus Hale stood in his workshop with a chisel in his hand and sunlight falling across an unfinished oak table. The wood smelled clean, warm, alive. Outside, autumn had given way to the first breath of winter, and the trees behind the house stood bare against a pale Ohio sky. Marcus ran his fingers along the edge of the tabletop, feeling for roughness, for splinters, for places that still needed patience. His hands had changed since that Sunday morning. New scars crossed the knuckles. A thin red line ran along his left wrist where broken glass had opened him to the bone. His ribs still ached when the weather turned cold, and some nights he woke reaching for a weapon that was not there, hearing gunshots tangled with the echo of Lily screaming his name. But he was alive. That fact still surprised him sometimes. So did the quiet. The world had not ended in Finch's diner, though for a while it had felt like it might. It had continued in pieces: hospital lights, police interviews, federal agents in dark jackets, local reporters outside the house, casseroles left on the porch by neighbors who did not know what else to do, and Lily sitting beside his hospital bed with a coloring book she barely touched. In the beginning, she had not wanted to let go of his hand. Even when nurses came in, even when doctors checked his bandages, even when Ruth Bennett tried to coax her down to the cafeteria for hot chocolate, Lily stayed close, her small fingers locked around his as if he might disappear the moment she loosened her grip. Marcus had thought the hardest part would be surviving the wounds. He had been wrong. The hardest part was looking into his daughter's eyes and seeing that the world had become less simple because of him, because of Adrian Blackwell, because of one terrible morning when pancakes and syrup had turned into blood and broken glass. At first, Lily asked the same question every night. "Are they coming back?" Marcus never answered too quickly. He had learned that children could feel lies even when they wanted to believe them. So he told her the truth, gently. Adrian was in custody. His men were in custody. Federal agents were watching. Their house was safe. She was safe. And if fear came back in the dark, she could wake him. Always. No matter what. For weeks, she did. Sometimes she came to his room without saying a word and climbed under the blanket beside him. Sometimes she cried because the microwave beep sounded like the diner doorbell. Sometimes she became angry at nothing, at her shoes, at homework, at Marcus for cutting her sandwich the wrong way, then collapsed into sobs because anger was easier than terror, until it wasn't. Marcus did not fix it with speeches. He could not sand grief smooth like wood. He could only stay. Stay when she cried. Stay when she asked the same questions. Stay when she was silent. Stay when his own nightmares clawed at him. That he began to understand was the quiet labor of love. Not the dramatic moment of standing between a gun and a child, but the 1,000 small returns afterward, proving over and over that the people who loved you were still there. Elena Rivera called the first time 2 weeks after Marcus came home from the hospital. Her voice was hoarse from exhaustion, but beneath it was something Marcus had not heard in the diner, hope. "We got the first group out," she said. Marcus sat on the back porch, phone pressed to his ear, watching Lily push a toy truck through the grass. "How many?" he asked. Elena was quiet for a moment. 7 children, 3 states, 2 safe houses. Marcus closed his eyes. 7. He let the number settle inside him. 7 children breathing free air. 7 families, or what remained of them, with a chance to hold someone they thought they had lost forever. 7 lives pulled back from the dark because Elena had refused to stop, because Ruth had lifted a gun with shaking hands, because a terrified delivery boy had thrown an apple, because Lily had cried, "Daddy, help him," and reminded everyone in that room what courage was supposed to protect. "That's good," Marcus said, though the words felt too small. Elena exhaled unsteadily. Daniel would have been 15 next month. Marcus looked out at Lily. She had stopped playing and was watching a bird on the fence. "I'm sorry. I used to think justice meant seeing Adrian Blackwell in chains," Elena said. "Then I thought it meant hearing him confess. Then I thought it meant making sure everyone knew what he did to my son." Her voice trembled. "But when those kids came out, Marcus, one little girl had a purple backpack. She wouldn't let anyone touch it. She said her brother gave it to her. I realized justice isn't one thing. It's every child who gets another morning." Marcus swallowed. "Then keep giving them mornings." "I will." Adrian Blackwell never made it to a public trial. The official report said he died in federal custody during the early stages of prosecution, and the news anchors repeated the details with solemn faces and careful wording. Some people in Brookhaven whispered that men who preyed on children did not last long behind concrete walls, even among criminals. Marcus did not ask Elena for the truth. He did not need to know. Adrian's death did not erase the damage, but it ended one chapter of it. The investigation continued without him. The recorder Elena had protected inside Finch's diner became the first stone in an avalanche. Names led to bank accounts. Bank accounts led to shell companies. Shell companies led to warehouses, motel rooms, private airstrips, corrupt officials. And men who had hidden behind money for so long, they seemed genuinely shocked when handcuffs closed around their wrists. For months, the story grew beyond Brookhaven. National news channels ran segments about the trafficking network, about the federal investigation, about the diner shootout that had exposed a criminal empire. They showed photographs of Adrian Blackwell in expensive suits, then mugshots of his associates. They showed blurred images of rescued children being led into safe buildings by agents and counselors. Sometimes they showed a picture of Marcus taken years earlier in uniform, though he hated that part most. Reporters called him a hero. Strangers mailed letters. Veterans groups invited him to speak. Morning shows wanted interviews. Marcus turned almost all of them down. He had not stood up in the diner to become a symbol. He had stood up because a frightened woman was about to be taken, because his daughter was watching, because the line between decency and cowardice had appeared at his feet and demanded an answer. Still, Brookhaven answered in its own way. Finch's diner remained closed for repairs far longer than anyone expected. Bullet holes had to be patched, windows replaced, floors torn up, booths removed. Harold Finch tried to reopen, but every time he stepped inside, he saw the teenager on the floor, the old man with a knife at his throat, Marcus bleeding beside table 7. In the end, Harold sold the building to the town for $1. Ruth Bennett, who became a local legend, despite complaining that everyone was making a fuss over basic common sense, helped decide what it would become. 6 months after the shooting, the old diner reopened, not as a restaurant, but as the Brookhaven Family Resource Center, a place for counseling, child safety programs, support groups, and emergency assistance for families in crisis. The red vinyl booths were gone, but one small corner near the front window remained preserved. Table 7 had been rebuilt by Marcus himself. He made it from oak, stronger than the original, polished by hand until the grain glowed in the light. On the wall above it hung a small brass plaque. It did not mention Marcus by name. He refused that. Instead, it read, "For every child who deserves to come home." The dedication ceremony took place on a cold Saturday morning. Half the town showed up bundled in coats and scarves, standing shoulder to shoulder in the parking lot where news vans had once crowded. Ruth wore a navy dress and scolded 3 different officials for talking too long. Harold cried openly during the ribbon cutting. The teenage delivery boy, whose name was Owen Parker, attended with his parents and still looked nervous in crowds. But when he saw Marcus, he walked over and hugged him without saying anything. Arthur Mills, the elderly hostage Adrian had used as a shield, brought a pie his wife had baked and insisted Marcus take the first slice. Elena came last. She stood at the edge of the crowd in a dark coat, her hair pulled back, her face thinner than Marcus remembered, but less haunted. Beside her was a little girl with a purple backpack. Elena introduced her only as Maya, one of the rescued children whose case was still protected. Lily, now a little taller and a little quieter than before, saw the backpack first. She did not rush forward. Trauma had taught her caution. But after a moment, she walked over and asked Maya if she liked drawing. Maya nodded. Lily pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket and offered it to her. Marcus watched from a few feet away as the 2 girls bent over the drawing together. It was a picture of a house with a yellow sun, 2 stick figures, and a large, crooked heart above the roof. Marcus felt Elena step beside him. "She still draws hearts," Elena said. Marcus nodded. "Not as many as before, but she still draws them." He looked at her then and understood what she meant. Survival was not the same as healing. Healing was not returning to who you were before. Sometimes healing was carrying what happened and still choosing to draw hearts. During the ceremony, the mayor asked Marcus to say a few words. He had refused twice. Then Ruth threatened to speak for him and make it embarrassing, so he agreed. He stood in front of the rebuilt diner with Lily at his side. The crowd quieted. Cameras lifted. Marcus hated the attention, but Lily slipped her hand into his and that made it bearable. "I'm not good at speeches," he began. A few people laughed softly. "Most of you know what happened here. Some of you were inside. Some of you helped afterward. Some of you brought food to my house when I couldn't even make toast without Lily telling me I was doing it wrong." More laughter, this time warmer. Lily leaned against his arm. Marcus looked at the building, at the new sign at the windows that had once shattered and now reflected the morning sky. "For a while, I thought the story of this place was about violence. I thought every time I looked at it, I'd remember guns, blood, fear, And all the things I couldn't stop my daughter from seeing. His voice tightened, but he kept going. But I was wrong. This place isn't about what evil did. It's about what people chose to do when evil walked through the door. Ruth wiped her eyes and pretended she was scratching her cheek. Agent Elena Rivera chose not to stop fighting for children most of us had never met. Ruth Bennett chose to protect my daughter like she was her own. Owen chose courage when he was terrified. Mr. Mills chose to survive. My daughter Lily. He looked down at her. Lily's eyes were wet, but she did not look away. My daughter reminded me that saving our own family cannot mean forgetting someone else's. The crowd was completely silent now. Marcus took a breath. I used to think being strong meant carrying everything alone. I was wrong about that too. Strength is letting people love you after you break. Strength is telling the truth to your child even when the truth is hard. Strength is standing up, yes, but it is also coming home, apologizing, healing,
and learning how to live gently again.
He looked toward Elena. Some battles end with arrests. Some end with names on documents. Some end when a child finally sleeps through the night. And some don't really end at all. They become the reason we build places like this. Marcus placed his free hand over Lily's. So let this building be a promise. Not that nothing bad will ever happen here again. No one can promise that. But we can promise that when someone is afraid, they will not have to be afraid alone. No one clapped at first. The words needed a moment to land. Then Ruth started loud and fierce, and the crowd followed until the sound filled the street. Marcus stepped back embarrassed, and Lily wrapped both arms around his waist. "That was good, Daddy," she whispered. "You think so? Mom would have liked it." The words hit him softly like snow beginning to fall. Marcus closed his eyes and rested a hand on her hair. "Yeah," he whispered. "I hope so." That evening, after the ceremony ended and the crowd went home, Marcus and Lily returned to their house. The sky turned lavender above the trees. Dinner was tomato soup and grilled cheese because Lily said ceremonies made her hungry and fancy food was emotionally unnecessary. Afterward, they sat at the kitchen table with crayons scattered between them. For the first time in months, Lily asked to draw the diner. Marcus felt his chest tighten, but he said yes. She drew the windows. She drew the sign. She drew Ruth with very large hair and Elena with a badge shaped like a star. She drew Marcus, too, taller than everyone else, which made him smile. Then she drew herself standing beside a smaller girl with a purple backpack. Above them, she drew a heart. It was crooked, uneven, and unmistakable. "What's this part?" Marcus asked gently. Lily tapped the heart with her crayon. "That means the scary place turned into a helping place." Marcus looked at the drawing for a long time. "That's a good way to put it." Lily was quiet, then said, "Daddy, yeah, I'm still scared sometimes." Marcus put down his crayon. "Me too." She looked surprised but not frightened by the answer. Even now. Even now. "What do you do?" Marcus thought about the workshop, the hospital, the broken diner, the nights she had cried in his bed, the mornings when they still got up anyway. "I breathe first," he said. Lily smiled faintly. "Then move. Then move." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Can we go back there someday? To the center." "Anytime you want. Maybe we can help kids draw." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I think they'd like that." Years later, people in Brookhaven would still tell the story of the morning Marcus Hale stood up in Finch's diner. Some told it like an action story full of gunfire and shattered glass. Some told it like a crime story about the fall of Adrian Blackwell and the network exposed by Elena Rivera's evidence. Some told it as proof that veterans carried courage even when they hung up their uniforms. But those closest to Marcus knew the real story was quieter and harder to summarize. It was the story of a father who thought love meant hiding the darkness from his child, then learned love also meant walking with her through the aftermath. It was the story of a grieving mother who turned pain into protection for children she would never know. It was the story of ordinary people, waitresses, delivery boys, Old men, frightened customers discovering that courage was not reserved for heroes in uniforms. And it was the story of a little girl who saw the worst of the world one Sunday morning and still chose, with a crayon in her hand, to draw a heart over it. Marcus never became comfortable with being called a hero. When people said it, he usually shrugged and changed the subject. But he did change. He stopped treating his past like a locked room. He began attending a veterans support group at the resource center. He let Lily ask about Sarah, about the army, about fear, about why people hurt children, and he answered as honestly as he could without giving her more pain than she was ready to hold. He learned that healing was not the same as forgetting. It was making room for love beside the memory. Elena continued her work, traveling, often testifying in courtrooms, helping dismantle the last pieces of Adrian's empire. Every few months, she sent Lily postcards from different cities. On the back, she never wrote much, usually just, "Another child came home today." Lily kept every postcard in a shoebox beneath her bed. On the lid, she wrote in purple marker, "Proof that good people move." And Marcus, who had once believed his life after war would be measured only by what he could avoid, began measuring it by what he could build. Tables, trust, safety, a home where fear could be spoken aloud and love would answer. On quiet Sunday mornings, he and Lily still made pancakes. Sometimes the hearts she drew with syrup collapsed into puddles. Sometimes Marcus teased her that they looked like potatoes, and sometimes she rolled her eyes and told him he still did not understand modern art. The laughter always came a little softer now, touched by memory, but it came. That was the miracle. Not that nothing had broken. Many things had. The miracle was that broken things held with patience and love could become something strong in a different way. Outside their kitchen window, the sun rose over Brookhaven, over the rebuilt center, over streets where children waited for school buses and fathers poured coffee and mothers packed lunches and people went on living because others had chosen not to look away. The world remained dangerous. Marcus knew it always would. But danger was not the only truth. There was family. There was change. There was love fierce enough to stand in front of a gun and gentle enough to sit beside a frightened child in the dark. And for Marcus Hale, that became the clearest truth of all. A man does not protect his family by pretending evil does not exist. He protects them by teaching them that when evil comes, love can still stand. Courage can still move. And even after the worst day, a heart can still be drawn again.